Welcome to Monocle Solutions. We are here at the Mark building in Sandton, Johannesburg, the wealthiest square mile in Africa, and we are joined today by the absolutely loved and well-respected Professor William Gumede. He is a senior academic at the University of the Witwatersrand, and we're going to be chatting to him today about an absolutely amazing book that I've had the privilege to read recently, and Professor as well. Prof, how are you doing? You keeping well?
Absolutely. No, thank you for inviting. I'm looking forward to have this conversation with you. I went through this manuscript, and it's an absolute delight to have read it. I did it in a couple of sittings, and I don't always do that these days, but it was such a compelling read that I got through it over the weekend in between watching football.
I must say, I had the same experience.
Yeah.
I just felt that the way the book was structured, chapter by chapter, that every time I finished a chapter, I immediately wanted to know what was going on in the next chapter. And then there was also this thing where sometimes the information that you were really looking for only revealed itself a few chapters down the line. So sometimes I was reading through chapters so excitedly looking for a particular chapter on a particular question that had come up earlier. I'm really glad you enjoyed the book. I think that it's going to be a well-received read in South Africa. Given that you are one of the most respected, in my opinion, wise elders of South African intellectual thought, especially given your prominence in South Africa and your position in academia, I would like to know what you think our leaders in contemporary South Africa and in society as a whole could learn from this book. What lessons would you like to give to our captains of society?
Yeah. Let me just first start to say the structure of the book, I thought it was very cleverly done.
Agreed.
Normally you read a book sort of in chronology in terms of chapters, but I think just the way the book is structured, it really gave a modern field, sort of tech field to it.
I agree with you.
There's almost the only way for me to describe it. I mean, it's just the way it was telling little stories, with sort of a line running through the little stories. I thought it was a wonderful device to do that. Now, from a South African point of view, from leaders' point of view, from business, as a country, we are in an absolute leadership crisis right now.
Agreed.
We're facing a world which is changing so fast. Climate change is changing. Artificial intelligence is really changing so fast. And now, more recently, Donald Trump is essentially, he actually caused a disruption of trade, of global supply chains, of economics, even of global politics. There's a readjustment of the world. Now, in this great uncertainty and an absolutely great disruption, we need astute leaders, one. Secondly, we need knowledgeable leaders. And thirdly, we need leaders with the imagination. And maybe even more important, we need to innovate. And the innovation is to respond to uncertainty. One can't respond based on the old ways, can't respond based on the old ideologies and the old received ideas and the old tech. And sadly, a lot of our political leaders right now at the moment, they're kind of operating in the pre-AI world. I grew up in the 80s when the period of the post office where you send a letter.
Yes.
And a telegram.
When they still had standing desks so you could fill in your little duplicate form.
Absolutely. So our leaders, sadly, our country leaders, South African leaders, many of our leaders are actually still in that kind of imagination. They're still in the world of sending letters and sending telegrams, where we're sitting in the world of AI. And for me, this is a book that grapples with the past, but with the present.
I agree.
That's very, very important. And try to look at the past with imagination.
It highlights new paradigms of thought leadership. Would you agree with a comment like that?
Yeah, no, absolutely, because we need new paradigms of thought leadership, because the old paradigms are inappropriate now. So maybe that's why, as a country, we're struggling. Why our political leadership at the moment, and some of the economic leadership, and even some of our business leaderships are struggling with old paradigms. But we're now we have to grapple with new paradigms, and we have to go into uncertainty. And that is why books like this and why is it so exciting, because these are the sort of thought leadership that we need in uncertainty, to guide society and to lift the debate in the country. I mean, one of the problems also that we sit with is the quality of our debates in this period of great disruption is very low.
Yes, absolutely.
So we're not responding to the challenge intellectually. So that's why this book for me was very, very exciting, because as a country, we need to respond intellectually to the new challenges and to the uncertainty and to the uncertain future.
I absolutely agree with you. We're definitely having a leadership crisis, not just in South Africa, but globally. And I think that David Buckham, who's I would describe as an information warrior, and Robin Wilkinson, who's a very humble person, but a mighty thinker in and of herself, I think they've done incredibly well to target the idea that we do need more dynamic ways of not just looking at things now, but as they've been shaped historically up until now.
Absolutely, because history tells us also a story. As long as we don't live in history and get stuck in history, and that's also the problem sadly of our current political leadership, is sort of stuck in a time warp of the past.
Absolutely.
So what we need to do is learn out of history and then be firm in the present, and then look towards the future. But we almost cannot look towards the future if we don't understand history.
Yes.
If we don't, but we have to understand it not in a black and white way or in a grey truth way, but we have to understand it in an imaginative way in order to innovate in the present and to navigate the future.
I think one of the reasons that we have this tension, this leadership tension at the moment, which is highlighted in this book with more dynamic ways of being and ways of thinking, I think a lot of this tension comes up between the East and the West, which is obviously very entrenched in this book. There's kind of resistance in society now to keep the old modes of thinking, the old ways of being, and they're contested against new ideas with the force of globalization driving them. This book tries, and in my opinion succeeds spectacularly at laying out the philosophical idea that the West has in fact lost its soul. Do you believe that the book has succeeded in showing this? And if so, what point would you like to highlight from the book that illustrates this?
Now, for me, the strength of the book really is making a coherent argument that the West has lost its soul. And because the West has lost its soul, there's a global vacuum. Because right now, the leadership of the West, sort of the US-led order, global order that has been there since the Second World War, is essentially in crisis. And because it has lost its soul. It is... the West is not anymore the standard barrier, whether it's a moral standard barrier or even the economic standard barrier, and even in some cases, it's not even the innovation standard barrier. Now, that actually opens up so many opportunities in this vacuum for even a small country like South Africa, sort of a middle country, sort of middle economy. If it allows us the opportunity potentially to provide intellectual leadership.
Yes.
Political leadership and even economic leadership, but clearly, I don't think we're going to get a political leadership.
Yes.
But it still opens up the opportunity for us and the intellectual
Absolutely.
leadership, because I mean, the beauty of our country now is I don't think people often. South Africans don't often understand. I mean, we like in the middle. We do the east, the west, the developing countries, the developed countries. We're actually almost an island nation in a way, because we're surrounded by two oceans: the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean. I mean, this is our country, one of the world's most diverse societies. We should be sort of a hub of new ideas, because diversity brings new ideas. But the sad part of it, we've stagnated. So instead of using this diversity to innovate, to imagine, to come up with new ideas, and to provide intellectual leadership in this global vacuum, we haven't done it. And I think this book will help in that sort of in helping to re-engage, if it could galvanize others also, and almost motivate others to also come, with intellectual responses, but that is imaginative, that is not stuck in the past, and responses that are innovative, because I mean, it's not going to take us anywhere if we come with responses that are stale, the responses are based in the past, and responses are based sort of in the old ideas. And I think, for me, the exciting part of this book really is it is trying to grapple with the past and the present, and also offer some pointers towards the future. And it tries to do it in an imaginative way, and that's what we need, and that's our challenge as South Africans, and our intellectual challenge.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I think that you've made a very interesting point, where there is a vacuum, a power vacuum that's taking place, not just globally, but specifically in South Africa now. Yeah. And that power vacuum has to do with the way in which we can see now that the West isn't this mighty megalith that it's made out to be, like we were always taught in schools, that it is inherently flawed, just like is neatly highlighted in the book. They give so many great examples. And into the vacuum that you're talking about has stepped a very contentious society that is now grappling it out to take a little bit of dominance in that vacuum space. You make a very, very interesting point around that. I guess that's why you're the professor.
I mean, just think about it. So as the West faces, almost like losing its soul, the vacuum that emerges opens up the possibility, but it also opens up the possibility for totalitarian forces, totalitarian ideas, and so on. And in this vacuum, I think we need a progressive response.
Yes.
Otherwise, if we don't get a progressive response, the space will be taken by the sort of totalitarian forces and ideas and populism and so on. I mean, we in our own country, we're battling with that, because we're also sitting with this vacuum in our country. And my fear is that unless we respond intellectually, the sort of populist, the sort of tribalist, anti-constitutional type of forces, the sort of status, anti-innovation forces will take control of this space. So we're in a battle of ideas, and this book is important in this battle of ideas to try to provide new ways of thinking rather than stay with the past, because we need to respond to both the West losing its soul and the West wandering off directionless, but we also have to respond to the totalitarians and populist forces that also want to take the space.
I think that the book has done amazingly well, David and Robin, to highlight historical moments where we have allowed tyranny, or maybe let's call them big men leaders that have ulterior motives to have impact in a certain time and space in history that has long living consequences that are negative for such a broad sector of society. And I think the book does incredibly well to highlight that historically. And then you raise that now in this moment in time, almost to say, hey, our current leaders need to have a look at what was done in the past. Yeah. Sometimes having good intentions is not, it's not good enough.
No, not good.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, essentially, we are at a moment of great disruption. At all levels.
Yes.
And the Trump administration, with his sweeping tariffs, has just also unleashed help unleash this great disruption. But the great disruption has already been going on with artificial intelligence, climate change, and so on. So now it's almost like a wave. Now, the danger is that we could get the big men type of thing as in the past, in the history of the moments of great disruption like this, and this uncertainty and the anxiety among people then often would want to look for great men figures, or not only that, but for great truths, like your final solution truths, and so on. And that's a real danger. And that is why it's so important from intellectually, and why this book is important to tell the story of the past. In moments like this, when societies then went backwards and chose great men, the so-called great ideas and final solutions, societies always go plunge down even further into the abyss. So the book is also a warning.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a warning that let's learn from the past. In moments like this, because in the past we had many moments like this, many great disruptions like this, sort of generational disruption. So our opportunity really is to innovate rather to go back and rather to go to old ideas. We shouldn't go there, and we should also not look for the sort of big men type of solutions.
Yes.
And the sort of big ideas type of, or rather, I would call the final solution ideas type of which is proliferating in South Africa.
Yes.
I mean, we see it, and we see the kind of leaders that we have. They're sort of, everyone stands up saying, "If you vote for me, I will deliver all of the things that you want."
In a way, I would say that feeding off what you've just said now, that the book is a beautifully weaved tapestry of historical disruption and the negative consequences that sometimes come from mankind's reactions to historical disruption. I think the book has done amazingly well. I don't want to give too much away, but we're obviously still living now with consequences of the Nixon shock and that kind of thing. And I agree with you absolutely that there's a huge spectrum of lessons to be learned in this book, not just by political leaders, captains of industry, business leaders, everybody that holds a leadership position in society.
No, absolutely. I mean, you just mentioned the Nixon doctrine of the 1970s. The consequences and the impact went on for, a couple of generations.
Even today.
Yeah, even today. If you think about, what happened in the mid-1970s, it disrupted many developing countries' economies.
Absolutely.
African economies destroyed it because their responses were outdated at the time to the shocks, and that is the lessons we have to learn. This disruption now caused by the Trump administration, which I think it may be bigger than the Nixon disruption, the potential consequences, because coinciding with that is artificial intelligence and climate change and all of the other kinds of forces that may give this this disruption potentially could make it much bigger, and that is why it's so important that we have to learn the lessons from the past. And what were the best responses? How do other societies? The societies that responded very well. How did they do it? Because we often forget also we're coming out of the COVID, which was that was also a big disruption, but maybe just barely out of it. I mean, I had just a week ago, I did a column for the Sunday Times, and And I was very, very interested. I did it in Iceland. So I normally wouldn't do anything on
Yeah.
I mean, Iceland's not my thing. But I was very fascinated because what people may not know, they actually had the biggest shock during the financial crisis.
Yeah, they had problems with the banking sector when
they all of their banks collapsed in 1 week. All of the banks, and so on. So I mean, it was absolutely great shock, and they actually came out of it much better than any other economy. So I was bringing it back to the book and bringing it back to the present, just to say, you know, what do the societies that actually thrive after shocks? You know, they innovate.
They innovate.
They come up with new things, and so on. And I think for me, that's the most important. If the book gets people and gets our political and business leaders to understand that in a great disruption moment like now, one has to innovate, and to also understand that our country, actually, we've got so much potential to innovate because we're the world's most diverse societies. So, you know, if one masters diversity, it helps you to innovate, because if you open up the space and bring ideas from so many different perspectives, and new ideas from different perspectives, we can actually successfully navigate this a great disruption. And I know it's frightening. I mean, as a country, just me engaging with people, I think people are anxious.
Yes.
People are fearful. I mean, we've seen the initial impacts, for example, of the tariffs, job losses, company closures, and so on. And our economy has, even before the tariffs, has been a vulnerable economy.
Yes.
You know, it's been a mismanaged economy. You know, we haven't innovated like other societies, and that's why we stuck. But I still think, I mean, the opportunities to say, as long as we understand what others did.
Yes.
During other great disruptions, the countries that thrived.
Yes.
And that we read the signs of the countries that didn't thrive, that try to go back and went for sort of the big man type of thing and for old ideas during time of disruptions, and it caused more chaos. So we absolutely have to make certain that we don't go that way.
You make an amazing point. I agree with you completely. And I kind of missed it to an extent, because when I read the book, I was almost reading for the moment, even if it was historical. And what you're basically saying now, one of the big things that we can learn from the book is not how we act in the moment, but how we react in terms of innovation to the disruption. And I think that you bang on. I think that's one of the key learning aspects in this book. And I kind of hadn't thought about it until you highlighted it. So that's a great point.
I mean, it's the innovation. I mean, I brought the example of Iceland, and when you go back and look what they did, I mean, it's innovation. Everything that they did was so different that nobody else has tried before. And even in other kinds of disruptions, think of it, Japan. You know, I have a book coming out on the East Asians' economic miracles in the post-Second World War. And remember, the Second World War for Japan, there was a disruption. I mean, they were defeated.
Oh, no, I mean, they
totally defeated.
Yeah.
But how they made a comeback by innovating. So almost everything they did, all the reforms, were never done before in Japan, and never done before even in other developing countries. So it's the innovation, and that's a great thing. And coming back to the book, is in terms of the lessons learned, is to say, well, here's a couple of case studies, case studies of disruptions, innovation, and not innovation. You know, societies that didn't
and then also consequence at the end.
And consequences at the end, because that's a big thing for us in South Africa now. We absolutely have to innovate. We have to innovate. We have to innovate, and we can't go back to like ideological ideas and populist ideas and authoritarian ideas. We have to stick to our constitution. We have to stick to our diversity, and then we innovate, and we have to partner. We have to collaborate out of this greater uncertainty.
As a result of the West losing its soul, which the book obviously does well to illustrate, we find that there is the vacuum that we've spoken about, the power and leadership vacuum. And stepping into that space seems to be two ideas that are competing with each other. It's kind of this old African socialist identity that's sort of stepping into this, or the non-Western socialist identity that's stepping into the space, and it's trying to compete with globalism. Modern globalism. And what we want for innovation is we want to join the modern world, and we want to use our diversity and our deep intersectionality to innovate. And I believe that the globalization, that global aspect, is where the potential for the innovation lies. And if we keep holding on to the old anti-West socialist Marxist tropes, it limits our ability to innovate, simply because all thought is then centralized. And if we start doing what I think David and Robin are trying to do with this book, which is to outsource thinking, to drive information, kind of as information warriors, that they in some ways lend credibility to the globalist aspect and fight off that old unwillingness to move.
I mean, you know, in our society in South Africa now, we do have a battle of ideas between, I would say, sort of outdated, archaic leftists, stroke, let's go. It's African-style socialism.
Yes, agreed.
Right? So there is something called African-style socialism.
Agreed.
And so we've got that, and it's embedded in the ANC, but it's not only embedded in the ANC, but also the spin-offs of the ANC. It's embedded in the spin-off of the ANC, but it's also, you know, even sort of parties on a black side of politics, they've also imbibed that.
Yes.
And it comes really out of the African liberation movement tradition. So a lot of African liberation movements, including the ANC, they were sort of infused by African-style socialism, right? And because they were unable to move from that sort of rigid and to innovate, that's the reason why all of the liberation movements in Africa have failed. I mean, they all have failed.
Correct.
In government. And that is why only one liberation in the whole world of the liberation movements has actually done well. It's in Singapore. This is a People's Action Party. And why did they do well? They innovated. So they are actually the only liberation movements in the developing world that actually moved out of that sort of outdated, hardline, almost fundamentalist, socialist type of ideas, which often what happens is obviously in developing countries in the African space is we've Africanized it, the socialism part of it, and in Asia, in the old Singapore, it was sort of Asianized, but the beauty with Singapore and that liberation movement, the People's Action Party, during their great disruption, they actually innovated.
Yes.
They used their diversity to innovate. The African ones didn't do it. In our country, the ANC, the reason why the ANC has failed for the last 30 years, it has been this inability to innovate. It is still stuck with the same ideas when the world is suffering. You know, this great disruption, technological change, climate change, Trump era, but they're stuck with sort of responses and Africanized socialist responses of the past to present problems and to future problems.
I think we should send a few copies of the book through to the house. Should I send Cyril a signed copy? Do you think he'll take my call?